Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, new evidence emerging in the Minneapolis church shooting, including firearms and materials found at the scene. The victims have now been identified after 2 children were killed and over a dozen injured. Katrina has the latest. After Wednesday's tragedy, President Trump's cabinet is pushing for mental and spiritual health, and the president cuts former Vice President Kamala Harris's Secret Service protection, Mariotsu, at the White House. Israeli forces recover the bodies of 2 hostages in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the family releases previously unseen footage from the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. Jason Perry brings us the details. The U.S. approves the potential sale of air-launched cruise missiles to Ukraine. Ariane Pazdar has the details of the deal, which is worth almost $1 billion. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will make his 4th visit to Latin America during the first week of September. The trip highlights the Trump administration's efforts to eliminate national security threats emanating from the region. Luis Eduardo Martinez reports.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Officials say new evidence has been found in the Minneapolis church shooting, which left 2 children dead and several others injured. The victims' families are now speaking out about their loss. NTD's Christina Corona has more.
New details have been released on Robin Westman, 23, whom authorities identified as the shooter at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis. Police say he was found dead at the back of the church with an apparent gunshot wound to the head. He was wearing black tactical gear and had at least 2 firearms nearby. Officers recovered 3 guns, a rifle, pistol, and shotgun, and found materials that may have been meant for a smoke bomb. The victims of Wednesday's shooting at Annunciation Catholic School have been identified as 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel and 10-year-old Harper Moisky. The families confirmed they were killed when the shooter opened fire through the church windows during morning mass. Fletcher's father spoke Thursday, remembering his son as a boy who loved family, friends, fishing, cooking, and sports.
Yesterday, a coward decided to take our 8-year-old son Fletcher away from us. Because of their actions, we will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him, and watch him grow into the wonderful young man he was on the path to becoming.
He also thanked the children and adults inside the church for their swift, heroic actions.
Please remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life. Give your kids an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
Harper's parents described her as a joyful 10-year-old full of laughter and kindness whose spirit touched everyone around her. In a statement, the family says our hearts are broken not only as parents, but also for Harper's sister, who adored her big sister and is grieving an unimaginable loss. They go on to say, as a family, we are shattered and words cannot capture the depth of our pain. One 12-year-old student, Grayson Singh, recalled the terrifying moments.
At first, we were singing a song, and then I just saw glass shattering going down the line, and we were hiding underneath the pews.
Grayson urged his classmates to stay quiet while they hid under the pews.
Until I hide under the pews and just sit there and stay, because I didn't want anybody to move. I just wanted people to be quiet. I didn't want to draw any attention to the back because I didn't want anything to happen.
Officials say 7 patients were taken to Children's Hospital. As of Thursday evening, 6 have been released and 1 child remains. Meanwhile, police say the shooter's mother, who worked at the school previously, has hired a criminal defense attorney, but investigators have not been able to reach her. Records show she lives in Florida. On Friday, the city's director of emergency management announced support for those affected.
If you were impacted, it's really important that you know this. If you were at the scene, if you worked in the church, if you were a neighbor that witnessed what happened, if you were a witness in the immediate area, you have the ability to access funds that will help you recover.
She said the funds are available on the state's website to help victims cover expenses like lost wages, medical bills, and child care. Christina Corona, NTD News.
In the wake of Wednesday's tragedy, President Trump's cabinet urging lawmakers to prioritize mental and spiritual health. And the president cancels former Vice President Kamala Harris's extended Secret Service protection. NTD's Mario Otsu has more from the White House.
It's such a heart-wrenching thing for all of us. And at the end of the day, the problem is not guns. The problem is the human heart.
In the wake of Wednesday's tragedy, Speaker Mike Johnson is now urging lawmakers to prioritize finding mental health solutions rather than blaming guns.
There's a mental health component to this that cannot be overlooked.
And Vice President J.D. Vance says that Americans need to address the root causes of this violence.
We really do have, I think, a mental health crisis in the United States of America. We take way more psychiatric medication than any other nation on earth.
RFK Jr., Secretary of Health and Human Services, says that NIH is launching studies investigating how gender transition drugs affect health.
The psychiatric drugs that might be contributing to violence, many of them have black box warnings that warn of suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation. We're not just in a health crisis, but we're in a spiritual crisis. And those things are connected. You have a whole generation of kids that feels alienated, dispossessed.
And while the White House has encouraged Americans to pray for the victims and their families, some public officials have criticized prayer. But Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is pushing back, saying that those criticizing prayer are, quote, expressing the same anti-God sentiment that motivated the shooter. Meanwhile, President Trump is canceling former Vice President Kamala Harris's extended Secret Service protection. Harris, like other former vice presidents, was legally entitled to 6 months of security after leaving office in January. Her protection was set to expire in July, but former President Joe Biden extended it for a year. President Trump's Thursday memo directs Secret Service to discontinue Harris's security procedures beyond those required by law, starting on September 1st. This comes as former VP Harris is expected to go on a 15-city book tour with kickoff on September 24th. And as Labor Day weekend is about to start, the White House is touting the lowest gas prices in the last 5 years and a record-breaking tourism surge.
As Americans make their Labor Day weekend travel plans, they will be able to enjoy 5-year low gas prices thanks to President Trump fully unleashing American energy dominance.
Produce more energy in America, you get lower prices, you get more jobs. That's our platform.
According to a Gas Buddy analysis, Labor Day gas prices are expected to average $3.15 per gallon. Reporting from the White House, Mario Otsu, NTD News.
And we have some breaking news out of Washington. An appeals court has struck down most of President Trump's tariffs, ruling them illegal. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit in D.C. ruled that Trump overstepped his authority when he used emergency powers to impose reciprocal tariffs, as well as separate tariffs imposed against China, Canada, and Mexico. The court ruled that the law Trump relied on, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, does not authorize tariffs. That authority rests with Congress. The decision does not affect Trump's tariffs issued under other legal authority, such as the tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Today's ruling is widely expected to be appealed to the Supreme Court. President Trump responded on Truth Social, saying, quote, all tariffs are still in effect. He also suggested he would appeal the decision. In the Middle East, Israeli forces have recovered the bodies of 2 hostages in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the family of victims of October 7th released previously unseen footage of that tragic day. NTD's Jason Perry has the details and a warning. This report contains footage that some viewers may find disturbing.
On Friday, during operations in the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces recovered the bodies of 2 hostages. One of the bodies is currently being identified at Israel's Institute of Forensic Medicine, and the name has not been released. The other body is that of Elon Weiss, who was taken hostage with his wife and daughter during the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. His wife and daughter were released in November 2023 in a hostage prisoner swap deal. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with a woman who lost her husband and her son during the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th.
I'm here to show all the world my story, to show the world the truth that the October 7 happened in Israel.
The video shows her husband scrambling with his two sons to make their way out of their house and eventually to a small room outside where they attempted to take cover. Then a Hamas terrorist threw a grenade in the doorway.
Her brave husband, Gil, hurled himself on a Hamas grenade to save their two young boys. One of the boys lost an eye. And that same morning, Sabine not only lost a husband, she lost another son on a nearby beach where the Hamas terrorists brutally murdered this young boy.
Meanwhile, several Western countries are planning to recognize Palestine as a state during the annual United Nations General Assembly in New York, something Hamas terrorists could claim as a victory in the war in the Gaza Strip. However, on Friday, the United States said it is denying and revoking visas from members of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority ahead of the upcoming United Nations General Assembly. The U.S. said before either of the Palestinian entities can be considered partners for peace, they must, quote, consistently repudiate terrorism, including the October 7 massacre, and end incitement to terrorism in education. The Palestinian Authority, which is the body currently governing the West Bank, has a policy in place that pays the families of terrorists who harm or kill Israelis if the terrorist is injured, killed, or detained in the process. However, the Palestinian Authority mission to the UN will receive waivers per the UN headquarters agreement. It was not immediately clear whether that waiver will include Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Jason Berry, NTD News.
Russia and Ukraine are still discussing a possible meeting between the presidents, but for now the fighting continues, and the U.S. approves a potential sale of cruise missiles to Ukraine worth almost $1 billion. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has the latest.
Ukraine keeps pressing for a presidential meeting with Russia. President Vladimir Zelensky says he wants to discuss security guarantees with President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian officials are seeking robust commitments from Kiev's allies as part of any peace plan.
Regarding the security guarantees, we are organizing the European track next week so that everyone understands clearly the architecture. Then, during a meeting next week, we want to connect with President Trump and tell him how we see it.
The Kremlin says Putin doesn't rule out the possibility of holding such a meeting, but according to a spokesman, it's still too early for that.
Putin believes that any meeting at the highest level must be well prepared so that it can finalize the work that must first be carried out at the expert level. At this point, we can't say that the expert work is in full swing.
And Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with Ukraine's Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak in New York on Friday. That's to discuss Russia's latest deadly strike on Kiev and the need for pressure on Moscow to bring peace closer. Yermak says the key priority is to push forward real diplomacy and ensure the implementation of all the agreements reached at the Washington summit. We are coordinating our efforts. And the U.S. has approved a potential sale of air-launched cruise missiles to Ukraine worth an estimated $825 million. The potential sale of the over 3,000 extended-range attack ammunition missiles includes GPS guidance kits and electronic warfare defenses for the weapons. This comes after Kiev came under a massive attack from Russia on Thursday. And Zelensky also says that Ukraine has secured $1.5 billion from European allies to purchase U.S. weapons. Meanwhile, in Ukraine on Friday, officials opened the National Military Memorial Cemetery with a burial ceremony for unidentified soldiers. According to Zelensky, a separate area of the cemetery will hold plots for the burial of more unknown soldiers. 5 unknowns were buried at the ceremony on Friday. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to travel to Latin America in September. It's part of the administration's efforts to dismantle cartels and stop the flow of drugs and illegal immigrants into the United States. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Adoro Martinez, has more.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio will travel to Mexico and Ecuador the first week of September. It will be his fourth trip to Latin America this year. According to the State Department, Rubio's mission will include swift and decisive action to dismantle cartels, halt fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigration, and counter malign extracontinental actors. The trip demonstrates the United States' unwavering commitment to protect its borders and neutralize narco-terrorist threats to our homeland. This week, Ecuador seized over 2 tons of cocaine being smuggled by Colombian nationals through the border. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem traveled to Ecuador in July to bolster security cooperation with the United States in their fight against narco-terrorists.
Talked about the partnerships that they build with our Homeland Security investigators and what we can do more to share information on going after cartel organizations.
Senator Ted Cruz traveled to El Salvador this week, a country with which the Trump administration has developed close ties in their joint efforts against transnational criminal organizations.
I think Americans are grateful for President Bukele for being willing to take violent MS-13 gang members and gang leaders, to take custody of them.
The Mexican government has not been as cooperative publicly with the United States. President Claudia Sheinbaum rejected claims by the Trump administration of cooperation with the Mexican government in their efforts against drug cartels.
The DEA put out a statement saying that there is an agreement with the Mexican government for an operation called Portero. There is no agreement with the DEA.
The Mexican president also said last week that the extradition of 26 high-level cartel members to the United States was not at the request of the U.S. government, but a sovereign decision.
What we can tell you is that in all these cases, it is not cases of extradition or sending members of organized crime. The decision is for the security of our country. These are sovereign decisions. They have nothing to do with a request.
Earlier this week, Mexican senators brawled inside the Senate after a debate on possible U.S. intervention against cartels on Mexican soil. The Colombian government has also shown reluctance to cooperating with the United States in their efforts against drug cartels. The Colombian president even denied the existence of the Cartel de los Soles, which is led by Nicolás Maduro of the Venezuelan regime. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The White House announces it has canceled $4.9 billion in foreign aid, but this could set up a conflict with Congress. The Office of Management and Budget says President Trump used a maneuver that could effectively bypass congressional approval. It's called a pocket rescission, and it only works within 45 days of a fiscal year's expiry, so September 30th. The funds are withheld during the 45-day congressional review period, and if Congress doesn't act before the fiscal year ends, the funds expire. Pocket rescissions are uncommon, and the last one attempted was in 1983 by President Ronald Reagan. The maneuver sets up tension in Congress as it faces an October 1st deadline to avert a government shutdown. Democrats hint that they could stall a funding bill if Republicans don't push back against Trump's pocket rescission. And why does the White House want to cut this foreign aid funding, and how will this impact Congress's budget negotiations? Hear from Representative Lauren Boebert tonight on Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up, President Trump appoints an acting CDC director 2 days after removing Susan Monarez from the position. Jason Blair has the details. A D.C. federal judge today delayed ruling on whether President Trump legally fired Fed Governor Lisa Cook, but said she strongly objected to arguments that Cook had been properly notified. Arlene Richards explains. And President Trump is setting a standard for new federal buildings. He's mandating they have a classical architecture style while denigrating the more modernist and brutalist styles. Jack Bradley breaks it down when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. An acting CDC director has been named by the Department of Health and Human Services, and Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will testify in the Senate next week, where he's expected to face pushback from Democrats over recent changes in the HHS. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
HHS Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill has been named acting director for the CDC. The move comes 2 days after Dr. Susan Monarez was removed from the position.
Her lawyer's statement made it abundantly clear themselves that she was not aligned with the president's mission to make America healthy again. And the secretary asked her to resign. She said she would, and then she said she wouldn't, so the president fired her, which he has every right to do.
Secretary Kennedy is working hard to restore the credibility and the integrity of CDC as a scientific organization committed to the scientific method.
O'Neill worked in various roles for the HHS during the George W. Bush administration before serving again with the 2025 Trump administration. Once chosen, the new CDC director will need to be confirmed by the Senate according to law. However, acting directors don't need to be confirmed. The HHS also stops about $122 million worth of grants deemed an inefficient use of funds, according to a report by the New York Post. The grants were funding research related to DEI and LGBT topics for 195 projects. The cuts are reported to have contributed to some of the conflicts with former CDC Director Susan Monarez, according to the Post. And looking ahead, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is scheduled to testify in front of the Senate Finance Committee next week for a hearing on President Trump's health care agenda. Committee Chairman Senator Mike Crapo wrote Secretary Kennedy has placed addressing the underlying causes of chronic diseases at the forefront of this administration's health care agenda. I look forward to learning more about the Department of Health and Human Services Make America Healthy Again actions to date and plans moving forward. And committee ranking member Senator Ron Wyden said in a Thursday statement, after the mass firings and resignations of respected senior scientists and public servants at CDC over the last 24 hours, it is more imperative than ever that Kennedy answer to the public and their representatives about the chaos, confusion, and harm his actions are inflicting on American families. The hearing is scheduled for next Thursday, September 4th. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
A D.C. federal judge today expressed skepticism over whether or not Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook was given due process before President Trump removed her from office, but she delayed ruling on whether the president's actions were illegal. NTD's Arlene Richards has the update.
After more than 2 hours of oral arguments on Friday, D.C. District Court Judge Ja Cobb remained skeptical about whether or not President Trump acted appropriately when he fired Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. She strongly objected to the government's argument that Cook was properly notified and had an opportunity to respond before she was fired. Late on Monday, Trump posted on his Truth Social account a letter addressed to Cook saying she was being removed from the Federal Reserve Board due to mortgage fraud allegations. The letter stated that he was exercising his authority under Article 2 of the Constitution and relying on the Federal Reserve Act, which states that he may remove her at his discretion for cause, explaining that he had determined there was sufficient cause. Cook's attorney, Abby Lowell, argued that Cook had not been found guilty of fraud and therefore the president's determination wasn't valid. He admitted that the statute doesn't have a defining section for how to determine cause, but said it was up to the judge to decide. The government attorney argued that the president has the power to use his discretion and that the court could not review the president's decision. The judge questioned whether or not Cook had an opportunity to be heard before she was notified of her removal. The attorney said that Cook could not be expected to be given the same treatment as a government employee because she was more like an elected official. But the judge said she viewed Cook as being more like an employee because she didn't have executive powers. The parties said they would agree on an expedited motion schedule by Tuesday. The judge indicated she was leaning toward giving them another 2 weeks to complete all of their arguments. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
President Trump signs an executive order making classical architecture the preferred and default style for federal public buildings, as opposed to the more modernist designs. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
A new executive order mandates that classical architecture be the default style for all new federal public buildings, except for in special cases that necessitate another kind of architecture. President Trump wrote in the executive order on Thursday, federal public buildings should uplift and beautify public spaces, inspire the human spirit, ennoble the United States, and command respect from the general public. Classical style is inspired by ancient Greece and Rome, and it's characterized by marble, dome rooftops, and tall pillars. And Presidents Washington and Jefferson personally oversaw the designs of the Capitol building and White House.
We have the Greek architecture showcasing columns in the Supreme Court, which symbolizes the democracy and civic participation. And then the Roman architecture influenced the domes in the U.S. Capitol, represents the strength and governance, basically.
But in the 1960s, the federal government replaced traditional designs with modernist and brutalist styles, which are characterized by a massive, blocky cube shape with a large amount of concrete. The Trump administration says the brutalist style has been highly unappealing to the general public.
It was adopted in the U.S. during the post-war period for its cost effectiveness, durability, and functional focus.
On day one in office, Trump directed his team to provide recommendations to improve architecture and beautify Washington, D.C.
My father said to me, when you see a restaurant and you want to go and you want to have dinner, and then you go up to the front door and it's dirty, turn around and go back because the kitchen's dirty. It's the same thing with the Capitol of the United States of America. If it's dirty and unsafe, it sets a bad tone for the rest of the world.
This is actually an order that President Trump signed during his first term, but it was quickly rescinded by the Biden administration. Trump has already made changes to the White House, including paving out a seating area with yellow striped umbrellas in the Rose Garden. He also installed 2 giant flagpoles on each side of the White House waving American flags. And next month, he'll start construction of a $200 million ballroom there. Trump is funding all of these White House projects out of his own pocket with some help from donors. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Should federal buildings embrace the style of traditional Greco-Roman architecture? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
How do you think this picture on my phone is compared to the one architecture behind you?
I prefer this behind me to that.
And why do you think that is?
I think that this just represents the age of our country, and it's an old look. That looks like more kind of Warsaw Pact.
Well, that's amazing. That's well, this is historical. It's beautiful, and that looks a bit Orwellian to me.
You know, if it all blends in with the grand scheme of things, it doesn't look too bad to me.
Does it fit in with this style? No, but I mean, there are a lot of areas in D.C. that look like that, though.
Kind of industrial looking, tell you the truth.
Blocky, kind of mid-century maybe looking.
Yeah, it could use a little dressing up, I guess. But I think more importantly for the future, make some architecture that we all are proud of. You know, you go to big cities in Europe and you see all sorts of things that are beautiful. Or for that matter, Chicago's got wonderful architecture.
President Trump signed in the executive order just recently, basically requiring all federal buildings to embrace classical architecture. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like we got bigger problems to solve for the president to be weighing in on that level of detail.
Well, the guy's a builder. I guess that's his first passion, right? He wants to worry about what color everything is. Everything's matching. So, I mean, it's all right. It don't look bad.
I'm not opposed to renovating and upgrading buildings and trying to make them more, alike. I'm not opposed to that.
I like it. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. You know, don't just make a bunch of blocks and windows. Make it something that we can be proud of.
If you want to make it that way going forward, I guess that's one thing, but I don't see the need to force a bunch of money spending on what already exists unless it's actually falling apart or breaking or something like that. I mean, classical's great, but I don't know, modern's good too.
Well, I think it's, being from Europe, I get that. I mean, it is beautiful, and you should preserve these things because they're part of your history.
Coming up, a trade exemption that might have made your online shopping easy and affordable is coming to an end. A professor of finance joins us to explore the economic implications of the end of de minimis, both to American consumers and the global market. And today marks the 20th anniversary of one of the most devastating natural disasters in America. New Orleans is holding events commemorating Hurricane Katrina's landfall. David Lamb takes us there after the break. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, including you being here earlier.
I know, it's quite a shock too. I guess I have something important to say today. That must probably be the reason, right?
Or news is getting too heavy. We need a reprieve. Let's go with your version, though. Let's start on the NFL, though, as the Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones says yesterday's blockbuster trade of Micah Parsons was a move to, quote, get us successful in the playoffs. Do you see his rationale?
Sort of. He's pointing to the fact that one of the players they got in return for Micah Parsons that's defensive tackle Kenny Clark was definitely going to help their run defense, and he should. I mean, he's a 3-time Pro Bowler, and Jones also pointed out that their last 3 playoff losses were really because they could not stop the run there. But on the flip side, though, Micah Parsons, rushes the quarterback better than almost anyone else. I mean, he's right there in the game with Myles Garrett and T.J. Watt as the best pass rushers there. And you have to be able to get to pressure on the quarterback in the NFL. I mean, Parsons is thought of so highly. The Cowboys got 2 first-round picks in addition to the 3-time Pro Kenny Clark for him from Green Bay. And then the Packers signed Parsons to the biggest contract ever for a non-quarterback player. That's a 4-year, $188 million. That's $47 million a year annually. So while Clark definitely helps the run defense, I think the absence of Parsons is definitely going to, it can't improve their pass defense anyway. I certainly will see what Dallas has behind Parsons in the defensive end linebackers category very soon. I'm sure he's trying to pin this as a positive for the fan base, so that's kind of why he's saying that. But so I hope you are definitely paying attention to Tiff, for your fantasy football league team here. You have to choose defense, obviously. Could be Green Bay or Dallas. You never know.
Seems I have a lot to learn. Moving on, though, to baseball news. Phillies slugger Kyle Schwarber tied the Major League record with 4 home runs in a game last night.
Yeah, quite a game for Schwarber there. 4 home runs, 9 runs batted in, and a 19-4 win over the Atlanta Braves. He now has 49 home runs for the season. He's now well ahead of Shohei Ohtani, who's got 45 in the National League. Now, in the American League, Cal Raleigh of Seattle, though, has 50 to lead everyone. But he is the 21st player to hit 4 home runs in a game in a league that dates back to the late 1800s. But he's also the 3rd one to do it this season. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. But anyway, you had previously Arizona's Eugenio Suarez and A's rookie Nick Kurtz did it earlier this year. Schwarber said last night, it was a fun night. I would have a lot of fun if I hit 4 home runs in a game, too. In fact, I would probably just be happy if I made contact with the ball when someone's only 95 to me. Just me, though, all right? Him, 4 home runs, he had a fun night.
Very humble, let's put it that way. Looking at tennis, though, the 3rd round of the U.S. Open started today. Where do things stand now on both sides of the draw?
Yeah, let's start on the men's side first. Our second-rate Carlos Alcaraz won in straight sets this afternoon to advance to the 4th round. Now, Alcaraz, though, had to take a timeout with a knee issue, but he was pretty much lights out after that. I don't think he dropped the game. Alcaraz, though, won this event in 2022. He's a favorite to win again this year. Meanwhile, American Ben Shelton, ranked 6th in the world, had to retire from his match this afternoon against Adrian Mannarino with a shoulder injury, so Mannarino will advance to the 4th round. Tonight, Novak Djokovic, who's won this event 4 times before, he will face Cam Norrie at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we got another American, 4th-ranked Taylor Fritz, plays at 8:30 tonight. Fritz finished runner-up in this event last year. Now on the women's side, America Jessica Pegula, she's ranked 4th in the world, beat former #1 ranked Victoria Azarenka in straight sets this afternoon. Now Azarenka had previously finished runner-up here 3 different times. The last was in 2020. But Pegula, though, wins. She advances to the 4th round. And then tonight, current #1, Aryna Sabalenka faces 30th ranked Leylah Fernandez at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Sabalenka is the defending champion here. So a quick recap for you where we're at right now.
All right, well, thank you for that. And shifting gears to college football action, tomorrow is the first full Saturday of the season. What are some of the best matchups?
Well, we got a really good one for you, Tiff, here. Huge game tomorrow, noon Eastern Time. #1 Texas at #3 Ohio State. So we got the defending national champions playing the top-ranked team in the country. This is a rematch of last year's playoff semifinal event that the Buckeyes won. Now, the Longhorns are actually becoming a favorite to win on the road at some sports books, thanks to some heavy betting on them. Should be a good one, though. Then at 3:30, 8th-ranked Alabama plays at Florida State. And the Seminoles hoping to bounce back from that 2-10 season. Very uncharacteristic for them. In the evening, we got another top 10 battle. 9th-ranked LSU at number 4, Clemson. And then actually all spills over to Sunday. We got 2 more games. Virginia Tech at number 13, South Carolina. That'll be followed by yet another top 10 showdown. Number 10, Miami hosts 6th-ranked Notre Dame. So a whole lot of college football action tomorrow and Sunday. I don't know about you, Tiff, but I can't wait to watch. You know?
I'm expecting a lot of updates on Monday.
There will be a whole lot of updates. I will bore you for a long time on Monday, which update after update after update, all right? You'll have to wake you up when you're done. It'll be that great, okay?
We have to make sure people tune in since it is a holiday.
Yes, it's going to be great, everyone.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And we'll be right back with more coverage after this short break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A long-standing tariff exemption now coming to an end. President Trump today imposing duties on all imports valued under $800. The administration says the move is closing the so-called de minimis loophole that's been in place since 1938. The latest decision comes as tariffs delivered a record $30 billion in revenue this month. According to White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, closing the loophole could add $10 billion in revenue every year. Besides raking in profits, officials say the move will help curb drug trafficking, piracy, and counterfeit goods. In 2015, the exemption threshold was raised from $200 to $800. Since then, packages claiming the exemption went from 139 million to over 1.3 billion in 2024, many from Chinese fast fashion platforms like Shein and Temu. The administration stresses this change is permanent with no chance of reversal. But there are some exemptions to the changes. Travelers will still be able to bring back up to $200 in personal items and receive gifts worth $100 or less duty-free. The change has economic implications not just here in America, but also around the globe. Joining us now to explain the trade exemption and its impacts, we have Michael Busler. He's a professor of finance at Stockton University. He's also an economist and public policy analyst. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you now. As we mentioned earlier just now, since the de minimis ceiling was raised to $800 in 2016, the number of packages claiming in duty-free has ballooned from 140 million in 2014 to 1.36 billion in 2024. Now, that's according to Customs and Border Protection. First, talk to us about the economic impact of ending this rule.
So, first of all, you gave a very good history of how the rule came about. As you pointed out, it went from $200 to $800 in 2016. Now, at that amount, there are a lot of things that could come into the country. Since there was no tariff, the products had very little scrutiny, and they pretty much went through. With the ones that had tariffs, they looked at to make sure the value was there. So as you pointed out, the large number of transactions in 2024, they actually found 31 million packages with some kind of contraband in it. Some were illegal drugs, some were drugs that we had a patent on here. India doesn't honor the intellectual property rights, so they copy a drug and then they sell it at a significantly lower price. A lot of times people buy athletic jerseys. It's $250 here. You get it somewhere else, and it's about $80, and it's shipped in. So they found a lot of illegal things were coming into the country, and they felt that the $10 billion in revenue that we could be getting from this, that they would add the extra personnel to handle this, and they decided to get rid of the de minimis clause.
Now, it's been reported that postal services in dozens of countries are limiting or pausing small package deliveries to the U.S. as a result. For example, International Postal Service, DHL, has stopped accepting shipments to the U.S. What could be the long-term impact on shipping?
Well, so the postage companies, the package carriers said, look, when we turn this in, we have to pay what the tariff is. So you're going to have to pay us ahead of time. They don't have a system kind of to work that out. So they almost all of them said, wait a minute, we're just going to stop until we can figure out how to do this. The market is so large as you point out, over 1 billion packages a year, whatever the monetary value of that is. The market is so large, they're going to figure it out. So in the short term, there may be some supply disruptions, but give them a little time, they'll figure it out, and all this will work again. How much of the tariff gets passed on to the consumers depends on a number of things. Real quickly, you buy something for $10, the retailer probably bought it for $5. So 15%, if that's what the final tariff ends up to be, 15% of that's 75 cents. Now, how much of that gets passed on the consumer? How much does the wholesaler or the retailer absorb of that remains to be seen. But there will be some upward pressure on price from some of these goods that people have normally been buying.
And as for why this change, President Trump highlighting the national security angle that the loophole allows illegal items to get in without inspection, like you mentioned earlier, but including fentanyl. Now, he ended this rule for China earlier, but today's global rollout addresses the issue of transshipments. What would closing the rule mean for companies like Shein and Temu, which also operate outside of China?
It's going to be tough for them. Just as an example, you brought up that the de minimis clause was eliminated for China in May. In April, China shipped 4 million packages. In May, they shipped 1 million packages. Now, I'm not sure what the decrease is due to. Was there some illegal things in there? I have a feeling that that had something to do with it. So for people buying illegal things, these copies that aren't supposed to be made, those are probably going to be more expensive. Companies like Temu, they've been selling electronic things for very, very inexpensive, and Americans have been buying it. That's probably going to drive the price of those up somewhat also.
And Michael, while there's been a lot of criticism to this rollback, the EU is also considering making changes to low-value goods entering duty-free. A report says the EU is facing similar issues to the U.S. Could we see other countries follow the U.S., and what would that mean for international shipping, but also markets?
Well, if they follow, so anytime that you go from a zero tariff situation to a tariff situation, a tariff adds to the cost of the product. So prices will go up. That may disrupt some markets. See, the sellers of the products have to be careful too. If they push the product price up too high, which frankly President Trump would encourage in the short term, at least, if they push it up too high, American companies like say, boy, look how much these things are selling for. They're profitable now for us to make them. And we'll start making some of the manufacturing leaving some of these countries and going back to the U.S. That's ultimately what President Trump has in mind with these tariffs. Yes, he wants to generate revenue, but he also wants to encourage manufacturing back in the U.S. So any company making things outside the U.S., if they make them here, they avoid the tariff. And he's trying to bring as much of that manufacturing back as possible.
Well, Michael Busler, thank you as always so much for joining us.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Today marks the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, one of the costliest natural disasters in U.S. history that claimed over 1,300 lives. Local organizations like the New Orleans Katrina Commemoration Foundation and the Hip Hop Caucus hosted events to mark the occasion. NTD's David Lamb reports.
It's a solemn milestone for communities impacted by Hurricane Katrina. 20 years have passed since the southern U.S. was hit by the deadly storm. New Orleans was one of the cities impacted by Katrina and had the most deaths. 80% of the city was flooded after the levee system failed. Friday's events, which included a commemorative march, honored those who lost their lives.
And we know that on this day, 20 years ago, August 29, 2025, our city and our lives were forever changed. But 20 years later, we stand and we sit here united. We're not united in faith, but united in real purpose. And it's been because of each and every one of us that are here, that are throughout the city of New Orleans, who made sure that every single one of those 20 years later, New Orleans is still here, New Orleans still stands, and New Orleans is truly positioned.
On Thursday, the Ella Project, a nonprofit that provides legal assistance to artists, hosted a discussion at the New Orleans Jazz Museum where panelists and locals came together. They expressed concerns about the preservation of local culture and the cost of rebuilt housing.
It's not going to last much longer if we continue going down that road. We have to change that. A lot of houses, since they come back and they fixed them, the rent is too high.
At the time right after Katrina, many folks were saying that, New Orleans isn't coming back, that the city's dead, there's no reason to rebuild. But New Orleanians knew that, no, we're going to rebuild. 20 years after Katrina, it's vibrant, it's happening. New Orleans is resilient, and we're going to keep moving forward.
Back in late August 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast. After first making landfall in Florida, Katrina intensified before hitting Louisiana on August 29th as a Category 3 hurricane. Katrina caused nearly 1,400 deaths and over $100 billion in damages.
You're everything I want, everything I need. This love's what I want it to be.
I mean, us as New Orleans, we struggle and we fight and we come up on top.
Folks told me the city has been through a lot, but people still love the area and call it their home. And we can see their resilience in the commemoration each year. In New Orleans, Louisiana, David Lamb, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.